Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Lyman. I'm a librarian with the Seattle Public Library, and welcome to BizFair, and welcome to my program called Resources for Small Business Growth at the Public Library. I have a slide deck that I'm going to pull up here, and so give me a moment while I do that. And I just want to, welcome you here, and excited to share some different resources that I hope will be helpful for you. Okay, so uh, this is my first slide here, and we're going to talk a lot about different elements of kinds of help that you can get at the library, including programs and databases, and we're going to talk about differences between different types of libraries and all of that kind of thing too. Okay, so one of the most important things that libraries do to support small businesses is that we provide what you need when you need it. So we are here to answer questions, and just like that today. I am in the chat here during this session, and I'll be answering your questions. And so I hope that as we go through here, you'll this presentation will spark some questions, and so do interact and type your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if we don't find an answer right away, just like with any other time, we can drop back, get some contact information, and see what else we can do to help. Okay. Without further ado, let's dive into the presentation. So, please chat with me if you have questions. When we start to think about like ways that the library helps, and we'll talk about different types of libraries here in a moment here, but think about some general ways that libraries help. Of course, when you think of libraries, you think of books, you think of print materials, and of course, we still have those. They're not going away. People love print books. Ebooks are a thing as well. So some people prefer ebooks, some people prefer print books, but we still, and we have, the libraries embrace both of those. That's a type of information that we can definitely help with. But a lot of the other kinds of details that small businesses and large businesses need when they're trying to grow are actually published in a different way. They're published in electronic subscriptions in databases. So we're going to talk about some different types of databases. We'll share some examples as we go through here. But wanted to sort of like in a general high-level way talk about some, that libraries buy databases that can help you with various data sources. Also up here on the screen, you'll see that I have media. So that might look like subscription to a learning tool. So maybe you're trying to learn how to develop a social media strategy, or you're trying to figure out how to use financial ratios or something like that. Your local library might subscribe to things like lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning. It is now. They've rebranded it actually a few years ago. That might be a way that you could use your local library to learn how to do those things. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about media. As I've kind of alluded to, like these are things that many of these things are things the library buys, so you'll need your library card and your PIN number to get into these resources if you're trying to access them from outside of a library. Often, if you walk into the library, you can find a computer there or get on the library's Wi-Fi and get access that way. But often people do want to connect from home, and so then you'll need a valid local library card number and PIN number. We'll talk about local libraries and difference between kind of access that you get there in a moment. So hold those questions until the next 5 minutes. I do have 3 local libraries that are nearby where I'm sitting right now. Of course, Seattle Public Library, King County, Snow Isle, but there are others, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. And each of those, and we'll talk about this kind of access that each of those provides. Okay, so let's dive into that too. So, libraries are local. So when we think about local libraries, libraries, I'm here, of course. I work for the Seattle Public Library, but there are other libraries in our beautiful state of Washington that also help with small business support. Each library is different. Each library system is funded in a different way. Seattle Public Library is funded by the city of Seattle. We're a city department, and so we get our funding through that. King County Library System is different, so they kind of cover the outlying areas on the other outside of the city of Seattle, and then Seattle covers those that are in the city limits. To the north of us, we have Snow Isle system that covers 2 counties. We have Pierce County nearby, Spokane Public Library, the Yakima Nation. So all of these are the examples here. But I certainly talk to folks in different areas of our state. I recently was talking with somebody up in Bellingham and sharing about the local resources that they can get at the Bellingham Public Library. Spokane Public Library has a lot of wonderful resources for entrepreneurs, as well as many on this list. I have on the screen here, and you can get a copy of these slides from, I understand you'll be able to download those. So the Secretary of State's office has a wonderful little library finder. So if you're not sure what your local library is, you can click on there and look up a library that's close by to you. Like I said, each one is different. So Seattle Public Library might buy a different tool than what you find up at Bellingham. But there are some general concepts that you'll probably get through this today's workshop that I hope will help you kind of figure out what kinds of resources you can ask for there. And if they don't buy exactly the same resource that Seattle Public Library does, well, then they might buy something that's very similar, and you could access it that way. And so a tool that does something like it's just a different brand and a different tool set, but it's got many of the same features and outcomes. Let's see. So library cards are free, and we try to give those out to as many people as we can, because we want these resources to be used. And like I said, the online tools are the thing that you need the library card and PIN number to get into. But many of the other kinds of resources like workshops, those are you don't need a library card to access those. Some of the consultations that I'll talk about, like those are also free and don't need a library card. It's really just getting into the tools themselves that you need a library card to get that access. Those are based on where you live, work, or go to school usually. So when you walk into your local library, they'll ask you to present some sort of identification that shows that you are a resident. Then they can give you a free card. There are some kind of workarounds though. One of those is that library systems sometimes have reciprocal agreements. So like let's say you live in Pierce County, and you can actually apply for and get a Seattle Public Library card and a Pierce County card and a Tacoma Public Library card and a King County Library card. So you can actually have more than one card based on these reciprocal agreements. But you need to get that local library card first usually, and then you can get your those from the nearby areas. Each system is very different. So if you're not finding where you have access, that's a place where you can. I'll share my contact information at the end of this, and you can certainly reach out to me and my colleagues. We're happy to kind of help you navigate what kind of local access you have. What even an assessment of the tools that they have and all that kind of thing. So you can also just reach out to your local library and see what they might have, and we can go from there. Now, worst case scenario, like let's say you don't find that you have the access to the tools that you'd like. There is a way that you can, and if you don't live in an area where one of those like reciprocal agreements applies, there is a way you could get a Seattle Public Library card or a Spokane Public Library card with a small fee. So that's another thing. That, like I said, that's worst case scenario. We don't want to have to charge you if we don't. But if you do live in an area that you don't have that access and you're in the state of Washington, that's an important thing. You could go that route too. And I'm happy to help individually with those kinds of things and figure that out. I'll just refer you to our circulation staff for the process, though. I don't do that part of it. Okay, so if you have more questions about access or qualifying for a card, like put those in the chat. I'm happy to help out with that. It's often a question we get because it is kind of confusing. There's like multiple tiers and like how do we find all that kind of thing. So happy to help kind of figure out your situation and what kind of access you have. All right, so moving on. Oh, here's my contact information right here. So if you do if you do have questions about what I just talked about or anything else that I'm talking about during the program here, let me know what questions you might have. We can certainly follow up. My email address is here, jay.lyman@spl.org. You can contact my colleagues and I at l2b@spl.org. And we've got the calendar of events there. So this is all the relevant information for Seattle Public Library's services and tools for entrepreneurs. Okay, and I will say actually, let me pause at this point and talk about some of those ways that you can contact us. So like you'll see a phone number up there. You can definitely call that. That's our quick information staff. They're probably going to ask you to leave some information with them, and then the team of librarians and including myself will get back to you. So that's a way you can do that, or you can write just directly to us at l2b@spl.org. We'll see it. Sometimes our workload is varying, and so we try to get back to folks within 48 hours. Sometimes a lot sooner. Sometimes we're able to respond right away and that kind of thing. So it's another place that you can write to us and get information that way. And again, you don't have to be a Seattle Public Library resident or card holder to do any of these things, just to access the tools. I will say that, sorry, I went ahead of myself there. I will say that these virtual business information appointments, we might just suggest one of those for you. That basically is a time when you can meet with us, and we've set aside some time to talk about what you're working on and dive in and do some of that work together. Often those are often those are things where we talk about the tools. Like we'll talk about what you're working on, what your business does, where you're at, all of those kinds of things, and then we'll talk about some of the tools that we have to offer. And if you're not in Seattle, we'll talk about tools in your local library. We'll take a look at all that. So it's really custom, like I said, what you need when you need it. That's what those business information appointments are about. And if you don't see an appointment on that list that works for you, then do reach out to us, and we'll see what we can do. We always try to accommodate people if our appointment calendar doesn't work for you. I know those have been super popular. I'll just share, like this summer, we've seen more interest in entrepreneurship than any summer I can remember, and I've been doing this since about 2009. So really, so we have been back, kind of booked up, but if they're so do reach out to us if one of those appointments doesn't work for you, or if you're not finding something, in the near future. Down here on the list too, free workshops and events. We have a lot of workshops happening at the Seattle Public Library for small business development over the next. Really from starting at the end of this month and working right into December. So do check out those events. There's some amazing things on bookkeeping, on taxes and legal things, and trademark and patent. And so we have a lot on the calendar coming up. So and those are all free, and those this fall are all virtual too. So you'll be able to take advantage of those no matter where you are. Sign up and you can get the event details. Okay, so let's talk about some of the different kind of categories of information that people ask us for information over and over again. So like I said, I've been doing this kind of work for about since about 2009, and I've noticed some trends in the kinds of questions that people ask us. Now, some of the specifics and the specific industry that you're working on, that's where things like really diverge and become really specific. And kind of your stage of business growth also kind of depends there too. But I still would categorize and things into these kind of 4 areas of types of information. Number one thing people ask us about is information about other companies. And I'm going to share examples and some specifics on all of these here as we go through the presentation. But generally speaking, got information about other companies. So maybe you're trying to develop a client list. I need a list of companies that I serve with my services. So that might look like I need a list of coffee shops in Bellingham that make more than that have been in business for longer than 5 years, something like that. So we have tools that can help you kind of develop those kind of list making. Maybe you're trying to understand your competition. Like, are there coffee shops in this area that I'm trying to move into? And it can at least give you a list. It's not going to give you a lot of detail on those small local companies, but it will give you a list, and it'll give you some details there. We'll talk more about that too. But also thinking about partners. Maybe you're trying to develop something and want to understand, what's going on in the industry because you want to partner with a company or something like that. So information about other companies, that's a big category. Information about customers. So this could be about, this one diverges with B2B and B2C, so business to business or business to consumer. And B2B, well, then we kind of go back to the point above where we start talking about creating lists of companies in a specific area, that kind of thing. B2C, that's where we start to think about households and data about people and how much money they make and how they live their lives and what kind of social media they consume and those kind of things. And we have databases that can help with a lot of that kind of thing. Sometimes we run to census data. Sometimes the tools themselves are based on census data. But things about consumers, how much money they spend on your product or service, sometimes that's a part of the question. Then another category is market trends. So for market trends, that's where I'm thinking about market size. What's the size of my market? What's the forecast? Do analysts who are looking at my industry think this is growing or is it shrinking? What's going on with that? Another category that I think is super important and we'll dive into for growing a business are these industry norms. So if you think about it, how do you understand what other companies in your industry are doing? How do you start to understand and kind of benchmark yourself against what's the norm for your industry? So for example, how much money do coffee shops spend on advertising as a percentage of sales? Those kind of things. So that's that would be in that market trend category and under the industry norms. And we have some tools that can do that for the broad industries. That's one challenge with that is that sometimes we have to back up to this larger industry. And we'll talk more about that too. So how to kind of figure out where your business fits, within the context of these larger industries and things. And then number 4 on the list here, general guidebooks and handbooks and things. Yes, we buy tools that businesses can use. and you can find a lot of those at the library here. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully, again, if you've got questions, I'm in the chat answering them right now. So do send them in as you have them there. So general guidebooks, we have there's lots of different kinds of examples, and it really just depends on what you're looking for and what you're trying to learn. And so do ask us if you have those kind of questions. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about kind of like when we're thinking about market data and how, I kind of alluded to this when it was like where you fit and like what data exists even for your industry or market. I think about data helping us tell a story. It tells the story of how our business growth is successful in the future. So and that story might be told for an investor, might be told for yourself, so you can kind of understand and kind of visualize where you fit and how the data kind of supports or doesn't support what you're trying to do. Yeah, or it can be for employees or for any stakeholder really that data is telling that story, helping you tell that story and supporting what you're trying to do. So sometimes we run into challenges when we're trying to we have this like perfect data point, and that's the star in the center up here. That's the the perfect data point says exactly predicts the future and says, yes, this is going to be viable. Like this idea will work, and it's gonna and we found this perfect thing. Well, none of it will actually tell us that perfect thing. But what we can find, because we can't predict the future, we don't know what kinds of things might happen. But we can help tell that story with these sort of arrows that are pointing at viability. And that's how I think about using market research to tell a story. So and if you notice up there, I've got these arrows with some of those the trends, the competition, and the customers. Each of those is kind of pointing at viability. If you notice, I intentionally made those arrows. Some of them come closer to the star, others are further away. The customer's arrow is I weighted heavier with a bigger arrow, and it comes closer because I feel like that's a very, very important data point. But all of those are sort of lining up to say, yes, this will work. Yes, this will work. So it's helping us support that story. And if you notice, those arrows aren't kind of from the same data source. Well, they're all from different data sources that are helping us tell that story. And when we can, find an arrow that sort of combines together, we love that. Love to find that, but often we don't find it that way. Information isn't published in that kind of way. It's published as here's the expenditures people spend on this product or service in this area. Here's the number of businesses that are competing with those kind of things. So they're all sort of pointing at viability. Some of the limitations I have there at the bottom, when we go out and start researching, especially that market trend category, we find these barriers of expense. Maybe that perfect market research report is $5,000, and so that might be off the table. So then how do we sort of see if maybe the library does subscribe to a similar report? We might get that in bulk through one of our databases. We might be able to find it someplace else. So this is the kind of problem that we try to figure out and solve in those business information appointments. The information that we're looking for might be proprietary, and it's one company that's a private company has it, and it might not be available that way. They have it, but they're not they don't have to share. Public companies have to share some things, but private companies don't. And so that data point we're looking for might not be available to us, and we have to figure out some other way around. And then, it might not exist in the form we expect. And I kind of already started to talk about that, but, maybe and I have an example a little bit further along here too that has that too. So let's keep talking, and we'll go through, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But just kind of be prepared for data might be collected in a different way than we thought it was going to be. And then, maybe we can use that to still be an arrow that doesn't come as close to the star, but is still maybe helpful to help tell the story. Or there might be another data point we can use to combine that to strengthen it and that kind of thing. So those are strategies I use when I'm trying to help folks with this. Okay, so I've used these two terms, market and industry, but I want to kind of define them here and come up with so to help you understand the differences in this, so some subtleties. So if you think about market, in that term market, markets are very fluid, and they might be like, if you think about like a farmer's market, you have all these vendors who are there. The market is everything happening there. It's the people selling, the people buying, it's the atmosphere, like the whole thing is the market, right? But the industry in this example are the two people selling carrots who are like sitting side by side there in two different stalls, and the industry is defined as just the sellers of and not the buyers and all those kind of things. Industries are really well defined. They're specific. And markets are very fluid and defined broadly. So if you think about it, these are the codes that define industries. And if we aren't sure, this is another area where we can help. But those, if we're trying to find stuff about a market, well, we can sometimes back up to the larger industry, and that's where we find data. So that's a strategy I use over and over again. For example, pet and pet supply stores. If we're gonna look at an example of that here in a minute too. But the code for pet and pet supply stores is 453910. That's the NAICS code for that industry. So there might be a whole bunch of data that we find at that level, but the subset that we're looking for, that sub-market, is like a part of that industry. There's also these SIC codes that some tools use. Those were an older set of codes. And sometimes companies that are publishing data will kind of reuse some of these codes and create their own specific things that start to become almost like a hybrid of market and industry. So it really depends on the industry or the resource we're looking at. But a lot of them use the NAICS codes because they are, a standard for business information. All right, and so we're going to talk a little bit about primary and secondary research. Primary research, that's like when we go out and ask the questions ourselves. Secondary research is really where we we're talking about there is published information. The reason I mentioned that is that sometimes, especially if you're doing something that's like new and innovative, and you might not find something that's published on this, right? So it's like, it's new, it's innovative, it's like, nobody's done this before exactly in this way. So then you might need to back up and do some primary research. But think about the secondary research first and what we were talking about with industry, because those can kind of help you understand the landscape of things before you dive into that, because let's face it, that primary research could be expensive. It could be you want to make sure that it's done right, and so make sure you're making assumptions based on actual data, qualitative and quantitative data, and things like that. I'm not going to go too far into this, but wanted to mention it because sometimes that happens. So this is my dog. This is Socks, as a little puppy. She's here so that we can all take a moment and we can pause and say, "Ah, she's so cute," and she is. Now she's an older dog. This is when she was a puppy. But we also are going to, I talked about like we're going to use an example. So this is an example of a market trend, and I want to point this out because it's a fun, a fun one that I like. In 2021, 1 out of 5 people who celebrated Halloween dressed their pets up in costume, or planned to when they published that data. So this is an example of a market trend. Now, when I was going out and looking for this, what I was expecting and what I wanted to find was this market size piece. So this $350 million are spent on pet costumes. I wanted that, right? So this is kind of an example of like, well, they're at least for free in 2021, they're only publishing this like 1 out of 5 people who celebrate Halloween part of it. That's still useful. That's still an arrow pointing at it, but it's not exactly what I need there. But maybe if I found like how many people celebrate Halloween, how much money they spend on things, well, then I could start to come up with an estimate that looks a lot more like that market size. But I've got some more work to do and that kind of thing. So this is one of those like data is not presented in the way that I expected it to. Another piece that I want to point out here. Oh, and here they are. That's Junebug. So the larger dog is Socks, and the smaller dog is Junebug as a little puppy. Socks is also here in her Darth Vader hoodie. So I can share that, like, yeah, I bought a costume for my pet. Guilty. But I have to think about, like, would I have bought that costume if I hadn't had my 2 kids there, saying, Dad, we got to get the Darth Vader hoodie for Socks? Probably not. I probably wouldn't have done that, like, if I'm thinking about that honestly. And so I think about like, who is the customer, and is it Socks? There she is, and she doesn't look very happy at all. But it does keep her warm. I will say that. But would I have bought it if I didn't have my 2 kids there? I don't know. I don't think so. So we're thinking about all that like, who's the customer and what kind of data points would support that argument that that this is going to be successful. And pet costumes are a thing. So yeah, people are buying these and spending money on them. So this NRF stands for the National Retail Federation, and I come back here every year to help update these slides. But it's fun to kind of watch how like pumpkin is growing and hot dog superhero has fallen 1 percentage point. But so this is a market that I'm tracking so that I can kind of update slides and things. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the specific other tools that library buys here. I have this one called Data Axle up on the screen, but there are other directory type databases that local libraries across the state might be purchasing. So don't feel like this is the only one, because there are other kinds of directory things that might be available to you at your local library. There are also other kinds of directories around, like there's a licensing database that the city of Seattle offers on the website of like companies listed in Seattle. Yeah, so there are like specific directories for like food trucks and things like that. So even if the library doesn't have a directory of its own, there might be another kind of like even better directory that is published electronically or even in print that helps you kind of understand information about other companies. So I'll just kind of share, like, here's a list of pet supply companies that I created in Seattle. This is just like a little piece of the list, but you can see, like, this is the kind of stuff you find, like Crown Hills Pet Supply and the Ideal Pet Shop. They're the person in charge, maybe that's the manager or the owner, address, those kind of things. That's kind of what you get from these. Some databases will also provide estimated revenues or sales. They usually are estimating because small private companies don't have to share that. So they'll like look at the industry and say, okay, for the pet supply industry, company that's been in business since about 2004, in this location, like, we think that they should be making about this amount of money. That's how these kind of databases do that kind of thing. they're using benchmarking tools to figure that out. So be careful with that. If you see a dollar figure and it's a private company, that's probably how they have done it. So, but having a list of companies from a directory can be a very useful thing for that company information. Moving on to consumers, if you're B2C, which probably a lot of you are, if you're B2C, here's another kind of tool or another kind of information that you can find in tools, like how much money do people spend on my product or my service in this geography that I'm interested in. So in this case, I have on the screen a map of Seattle, and you can see that in the Central District, people who live in that area are spending about $518 annually on brunch, breakfast and brunch away from home. So that's not like buying, that's going out to Waffles or something, not like I bought them at the store and are making them at home. You can kind of use that to compare, and I think that's a really good way to use this kind of information. So look at how that differs nationally to that location. There's some really big differences. Couple things to think about, like this is where the people who spent that money live, not where they spent the money. So that's an important distinction. It's also an average. What I have on the screen is an average. So that's averaging everyone in that geography, whether they go out to brunch or if they don't. So those who don't, bringing that number down. Those that do probably spend more than that per year. Things to think about. This is another kind of data point. This is one that called psychographics. So really, if you're thinking about demographic information about how old people are, how much money they make, all those kind of things, yeah, that's useful. And we have some tools that could help you find that. But marketing companies will often create these personas and then tell us how many people who kind of meet that persona, that lifestyle, live in a geography. So in this case, these are soccer fans, two family properties that are interested in economic literature. So these are all like lifestyle things, not necessarily demographic characteristics. In the little channel preferences, check this out. Like now, once we've defined this lifestyle of how this is how people live their lives, well, now they've also kind of shared with us that these folks are 146 on the social media channel preference. So this is an index, and the way indexes work, 100 is the norm, and so these folks are 46 points above the norm in social media. They're 64 points above the norm for email marketing, 66 points above the norm for text messaging. But they're way low on all things audio, so podcasts and radio and those kind of advertising. So the other one is snail mail, and then TV and also streaming video. So this can help us understand how we can reach customers in our geography, and also how to talk to them. What are things that are going to be appealing to them? These are just some top level points that I pulled out for this slide. There would be a whole set of data about this cosmopolitan achievers that we could go after and find if they were in our geography that we were interested in. And so for Seattle, cosmopolitan achievers, they're 8.92% when I pulled this report, or 65,000 people. Nationally, those are about almost 2%. Washington statewide, they're almost 3%. So you can start to see why I chose that group for Seattle. And you might find like 3 groups in your area that are like jumping out at you with this kind of report. So lifestyles, this is called psychographics. And we get this one through a tool called Demographics Now, but there might be other. I mean, there are other tools called Tapestry. Nielsen is a brand name that people hear for those kinds of things. They do these. A lot of different companies do them. These are out of the box kind of things that would talk about that define psychographics. But sometimes people will hire a market research company, and this is what they'll do for them: is create these specific personas for a specific geography. But that can be an expensive proposition. So sometimes this kind of thing will work really well. Okay, moving to the market trend category here. This is where like knowing your NAICS code can be super helpful. So in this case, I pulled out the pet food manufacturing industry, sort of moved from pet and pet supplies to the manufacturing aspect of the food. This is where we can start to get to some of that benchmarking data. So look up here at the top if you see that income statement. This again is like these reports are 14, 15 pages each. We get them through a tool called ABI Inform. So your local library might have access to that. And so if you look at the income statement up there at the top, you can see these are some benchmarking things. And so advertising and sales are about 0.5% that's the norm for this industry. So they're not spending a lot of money because they're manufacturers, they're not retailers. So they probably already have their paths to for most of the companies that are producing pet food have a path, and so they're not spending a lot of money on that. But the pet and pet supply store industry, if we were to pull that report, that would probably be a bigger bump, maybe 4% or something. So you can bounce up your numbers against some of these numbers here too. The columns, those are company sizes. I didn't include the top part, but it would include like company size, so you could really see compare by all of the ones that they've analyzed, and it would tell us how many companies they've analyzed. That's an important fact too. And then by company size, like how they're doing. I also like these business trends down here at the bottom because those can be really helpful to understand what's going on in the industry, how people are thinking about products and services and things. So this is one example of a market trend source, and some ratios too. I got another ratio tool that I'll share here in a minute too. But before that, so now we're kind of moving into those learning resources. I mentioned LinkedIn Learning. Many libraries in Washington offer LinkedIn Learning as a free subscription with your library card. So explore that, see if your library has those. Those have a lot of different classes, high quality workshops on doing really specific things or general things too. So take a look. If you're trying to how am I going to figure out how am I going to learn how to do this? See if LinkedIn Learning has a nice video course on it, and they might have something perfect for you. So here's a couple of examples: marketing tools, digital marketing trends, marketing on Instagram, variety of courses and things. Some libraries might subscribe to things like this, Business Plans Handbook, where and this one actually came in print for many years too. So these are basically business plan examples. So sometimes it helps to have a template to work from, and to see also how people have talked about things in their business plan. See the tone, see how many graphs, those kind of things can be super, super helpful. Here's one for a pet sitting service. And you can see oh, they only have two sentences in the executive summary. Maybe you want to have more, maybe less. You could look at some examples for your industry or for other industries and see how how people have done those. Best customers. This is a nice tool that very handy and useful. It's a little hard to read because it's small here on the screen, but you can see here's some expenditures similar to those kind of what we saw in demographics now, but nationally, and some really nice way, an easy way to kind of get an overview of who is my top customer spending wise for a particular product or service. Here again, you might have to back up to the larger industry to get to the most relevant data for you. I promised more ratios, and we got more ratios here. The screenshots are a little bit old, but we buy these more recently. I'd say the one that we get the most recent here is the one called RMA. And we get that as a database, but you might also look and see if your library has it as a print resource. The Almanac of Business and Industrial Financial Ratios, that's a mouthful to say. That one like only comes in print, and I haven't seen a recent edition for a couple of years on that one. So that one I'd be a little bit more hesitant, although it's really great data. It's aging quickly because I haven't seen the a new version of that. But RMA we get electronically. You can see, if you liked what you saw with that ratio we saw in first research, well, here's a whole bunch more of ratios. And if you aren't sure kind of how to read these ratios, there's introductory material that helps with that. So like they can help you understand how do you read, each of these categories. But you can see like down the side, is the categories and the ratios, and then down across the top is the like business size and numbers of businesses. There's also some material at the beginning that talks about like how they collect data. There's a lot of stuff in here. So if you're stuck, talk to maybe SCORE or SBDC or some of the other local CDFIs that might have free mentors, because they could be helpful in helping you kind of understand which of these ratios should I be looking at, and and how do I use them, and how do I interpret this for my purposes. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I want to just mention that sometimes kind of coming back to the beginning of like, what do we do when we can't find the specific data point that we expect to see? That's where I start to think, trade associations. Trade associations can really, they're all different, so you never know for a specific industry. But they can sometimes be a good data source, and that might not pop up in the top of the Google search. So you might need to like kind of figure out, okay, well, what trade association represents the industry, and then like start to dig around on their website and see if they've got any white papers or reports or industry outlooks or some of these things. Yeah, those first research reports that I shared at the very bottom, they have a list of industry websites and things. Those can be a really good place to start to look for those associations and things. And some of them, they have different takes. Like there might be more than one industry, so you have to really look at like what are they really doing? Like how are they representing the industry, and what do they do? You might have to become a member to get some of the pricier data or something, but it might be worth it. So take a look at your trade association and see what they got, and see how they might help. For local business publications, the Puget Sound Business Journal and the Daily Journal of Commerce are two local ones for Seattle, but there might be some others for your location that you should take a look at. Other tricks, I use these kinds of searches a lot. So Google Scholar may have data. It really depends on the industry, but Google Scholar kind of limits the universe of your Google results to just those things that are published in scholarly type publications. And so for some of the like science-based kinds of companies I've helped, or healthcare-based or education-based, or things that somebody might have published something scholarly about, even recycling and kinds of things, sometimes we'll find a report that pops up in Google Scholar. I use Google Advanced Search quite a bit, especially this site search one, where I'll once I find that trade association, I back up and use Google to search that site. So it limits the results to the site that I select there. And then the other things are like file type. So I could say like I can limit my search to just those things that are PDFs, because I know that's the end result I'm looking for. And then if what I'm finding is just an abstract of an article and it looks perfect, you could explore doing an interlibrary loan for that if it's something that's published in a trade publication or something. They're not, you go through your local library to initiate an interlibrary loan. Sometimes there's a charge for that service. Sometimes there's not. It really just depends on your local library. But they might leverage relationships with academic libraries and other kinds of libraries to get that for you. So that can be a useful kind of access piece. I've got a couple of kind of general guidebooks up here. Like this is something that, like when we were talking about like print at the beginning, yeah, we might have a guidebook on how to form a business and how to like start a pet business. Those can be useful and kind of learn. These almost fall into the learning category. I think they do fall in the learning category also. Okay, so I'm gonna like talk briefly on some of the other kinds of things. So sometimes folks are really looking for connection, not really like that data for a business plan, but really they're looking for like, well, what other organizations are out there? Of course, here we are at BizFair, so BizFair has a lot of these organizations that we're gonna share about. But this is another kind of question you can ask us is like, oh, I'm trying to find an organization that does this. What who in my local area helps with this? So that might be a place where you could that's another area we can help with. We try to do these business resource open houses once per quarter. So those can be a place where we might share about different local organizations, or we ask local organizations to come and share about what they do. So that might be a good one to come to. That's where this business of community lovely drawing came from. So and then something that the Seattle Public Library is doing are legal consults. So if you have questions around intellectual property, patent, trademark, copyright, or maybe you have questions about incorporation, LLC or C Corp or S Corp, we have local attorneys who we're working with the University of Washington's Entrepreneurial Law Clinic, who recruits local attorneys that are there to volunteer in their time to help you in half-an-hour increments. So you can sign up on Seattle Public Library's website. These are all virtual, they're free. You don't form an attorney-client relationship as part of this. That's an important feature, an important aspect. So they're not going to take on work for you or be able to review your contract for you or something like that. But they can answer questions generally based on your situation. And sometimes that's what people need to help them kind of understand, can I do this myself? Do I need to hire somebody for this? What might it cost? Like what those kind of things. So we get those kind of questions a lot in those legal consults. Sign up for them. They're on the Seattle Public Library's website. We have them kind of ongoing this year and into next year. So take advantage of those. And then, I'll kind of coming to the end here, come back to our like local libraries. Reach out and find out what your local library is and also what kind of things they help with. You might be surprised at the kinds of tools that they are already offering for you for free at your through just getting a library card. And I think we've reached the end here. So I'm going to put the slide up here for my contact information. Remember, going back to the beginning, those business information appointments, a great place to start. Those are on the Seattle Public Library's website, spl.org/business. Reach out to me and the team at l2b@spl.org if you have questions. Type questions in the chat. And I hope that you enjoy your time at BizFair today, whether you're attending virtually or in person. There's a lot of stuff going on, and thanks for being here. With that, just going to sign off, and thanks for being here. Thanks for taking part in BizFair.